Even when separated, at least all of Kumandra could agree on one thing. Mangoes are awesome. Hey everybody, welcome to Mainely Movies. Today I'm going to be talking about Disney's 59th animated feature film, the 2021 action-adventure fantasy, Raya and the Last Dragon, which will be released in theaters and on Disney Plus Premier Access on March 5th, and will be included in the standard Disney Plus subscription at no extra charge starting June 4th. If you're new here, please consider subscribing for a variety of movie-related content like reviews, rank lists, and trailer reactions. All my reviews include a breakdown of the pros and cons, my rating, and some tailored film recommendations, so be sure to watch through to the end of this video for all that extra content. Raya and the Last Dragon stars the vocal talents of Kelly Marie Tran, Awkwafina, and Gemma Chan, and was directed by Don Hall and Carlos López Estrada. It tells the story of Raya, voiced by Kelly Marie Tran, who, following a legendary apocalyptic event, must find the only remaining dragon in order to save the world. Raya and the Last Dragon is easily one of the best Disney animated features we've gotten in years. I'll admit that I originally didn't have all that much anticipation for this movie. The premise didn't do much to entice me, and while the trailers got me a bit more intrigued, I was still a little hesitant about the story. Turns out that I had nothing to be hesitant about. This movie has got some great characters, a very strong story with some timely themes, and some absolutely stunning animation. There are quite a few characters in this movie worth talking about, but it probably comes as no surprise, given the title of the film, that Raya is among the most essential. And I have to say that I loved this character. She is officially a Disney princess, but certainly not your traditional princess. She is a straight-up badass. Not only is she extremely self-sufficient and capable, but her princesshood never defines her. She isn't central to the story because she's the chosen one, or because she's a princess and it's expected of her. She takes it upon herself to embark on this mission because it's the right thing to do. It's the only thing to do. But that doesn't make her a flawless character, and she learns and grows a lot over the course of this film. I certainly didn't expect this, but Raya is my favorite Disney princess since Mulan, and quite possibly my favorite Disney character of the last 2 decades. Although Raya and the Last Dragon's got a good deal of fantasy and mythological elements, this is an action-adventure film through and through. The trailers had hinted that this was likely the case, but I was pleasantly surprised by just how action-packed and adventurous the story was. Seriously, this is the most action-intensive Disney animated feature, at least since the Renaissance era, and maybe ever. It's got a big, adventurous journey and quest at its core, but along the way, with this adventurous storyline, there are a ton of action sequences. There are some big, sweeping, post-apocalyptic events, a diverse array of chase sequences and daring escapes, and some really well-choreographed fight sequences, involving both a lot of hand-to-hand combat, as well as some pretty cool weapons. This is a big, expansive movie, both in terms of the story and the locations. We focus on the distinct lands of what was once collectively known as Kumandra. Not only that, but the majority of the story takes place after a sort of post-apocalyptic event. So to really have a good understanding of what's happening, we needed some backstory. The history and mythology of Kumandra, and much of that is delivered as exposition towards the beginning of the movie. Now, I'm somebody who tends to like exposition more than the average person, but I think the historical oration method that's used was pretty effective at delivering a lot of important information in a way that wasn't negatively exposition obvious. In addition to the expansive and century-spanning story, we've also got an amazing journey across a diverse set of locations. It's one of those things that's actually almost counterintuitively disappointing, because we only get to see a fraction of what this world has to offer, and it leaves you wishing there was more time to explore. One of the things I was most concerned about, especially after the second trailer, was the tonal balance of this film. I'm looking at you, Khan, baby. But I'm relieved to say that it all works really well. The central problem or conflict of this story is surprisingly dark and dire, but there's this really interesting mix of adventure, optimism, and humor that work to provide a counterbalance. Raya herself has a very relatable personality, so she does provide some of the humor, especially with her interactions with other characters. But I think the biggest source of humor and optimism comes from the last dragon, Sisu. I was originally a little wary of how this character would play, and I kind kinda thought she would get annoying after a while, but she ended up being one of my favorite aspects of this movie, and Awkwafina was the perfect voice casting for the role. Before I get into talking about the themes of this movie, I do want to mention something that really stood out to me, in a not necessarily bad way, but at the very least, a noticeable way. This film really draws a lot of influence from other Disney movies. Again, this isn't really a bad thing by itself, especially since most Disney movies are really good, but I found that the similarities were almost distracting at points. I certainly didn't set out to do this, but while I was watching, I found myself making sort of a mental note every time there was something obviously inspired by a previous film. So while watching, I'd be thinking, oh, that montage sequence is just like in Mulan. Or wow, that character dynamic is just like Moana. This isn't to say that Raya isn't a unique film. It certainly is. It's got a lot of fresh ideas and refreshingly stays away from a lot of classic Disney elements, like being a musical, for example. It just seems to bizarrely overemphasize some of its influences. Like any good Disney movie, this film has some very impactful themes and messages, many of which are important all the time, but especially timely and relevant right now. It's very much a film about unity and repairing fractured relationships. It's about trust and not letting events of the past create an unbreakable cycle of animosity. These themes are explored at multiple levels in this film, each with their own specific impact. There's the broader stroke that looks to reunite groups of people, the lands of Kumandra in this case. But there's also a more individual level view that's perhaps even more relatable. It's about repairing a relationship, fixing a friendship. We've got a character who asks about how you even approach somebody to attempt to begin that reconciliation process when it's been years. It's the kind of thing that movies don't often tackle, but it's something we all experience. And so, Raya and the Last Dragon really covers all of the bases and provides just about everything you could want from a Disney film. It's got important themes and messages that are relevant to kids and adults alike. It's got some amazing and vibrant animation, a compelling story that expertly blends drama, action, and humor, a set of memorable characters, including one of the coolest and most capable Disney princesses we've ever had. It's got fantasy elements, adventure elements, it's a coming-of-age story. I was thoroughly impressed with this movie, and have no doubt that it's going to be remembered as one of the Disney greats. Alright, let's talk about the pros and cons. The first pro has gotta be Raya and Sisu. I'm combining them as a single pro here, but really this encompasses Raya as an individual character, Sisu as an individual character, and then the interplay between the two characters. Raya is one of my favorite Disney characters in a long time, and easily the best princess we've had in 23 years. She's capable and a complete badass, but also a remarkably relatable character. In spite of being a dragon, Sisu is also surprisingly relatable at times, and brings some much needed humor and optimism to the story. And the two of them together just work so well. They have great chemistry, plus they need each other and learn from each other over the course of the film. Pro number 2 has to be the themes. The need for unity and trust certainly isn't a message that's unique to Raya and the Last Dragon, but it is a message that's very effectively incorporated into the story and presented to the audience. It's all about trust and forgiveness, in putting aside past issues and taking the first steps towards reconciliation. It's about putting your faith in somebody and how that can empower them to extend that same faith back to you. These themes work at a number of different levels in the story, and real life, and help to provide a really strong and meaningful core to the film. The third pro is the animation. I feel like I say this about nearly every Disney or Pixar release these days, but the amazing animation never fails to impress me. The character design here is excellent, both for the human and dragon characters. On top of that, the backgrounds and various locations are stunning as well. This is a very adventurous film, so we get a diverse set of backdrops. Deserts, jungles, rivers, towns, caves, they all serve as impressive looking locations for some even more impressive looking action sequences. On the con side, my only real issue was just how much this movie was influenced by other Disney movies. Now, like I said before, merely drawing inspiration from earlier films isn't really a bad thing. All movies do it to some extent. The issue lies with how distracting it was at times. In the midst of this story, I was frequently picking up on similarities, references, and sometimes even direct homages to other Disney movies, which worked to kind of split my focus. Some of these things were just broad character similarities, which you can't really fault too much. Other things were more specific though, like the relationship dynamics between some of the key characters, certain recognizable story beats, and even some very blatant visual cues and editing of shots. Again, this isn't a massive issue for me or anything, and people who aren't overly familiar with Disney movies won't even pick up on most of these things, but I had to mention it because it was a bit distracting at times. Before I give you my rating and recommendations, I want to remind you that if you're interested in buying any of the films I mentioned today, I do have affiliate links for all of them in the description below. I get a small commission from anything you buy using one of my links, so I'd really appreciate it if you use them if you're in the market for any of these movies. I'm gonna give Raya and the Last Dragon 4 out of 5 paws. This movie has some excellent animation, some great characters, and a really compelling adventure story. Honestly, when I first finished the film, I thought it was just a solid 4-paw movie. But as I thought about it more and wrote this review, I found myself liking it more and more. It's not quite a 4.5-paw movie for me right now, but I wouldn't be surprised if it becomes one on rewatch. I would recommend Raya and the Last Dragon to anybody who likes Disney films. That might sound a little obvious, but honestly, this was one of the better Disney animated features we've gotten in a while. It draws a good deal of inspiration from movies of the Renaissance and Revival eras, so if you like those films, you'll probably like this one too. And if you're somebody who just likes a good action-adventure film, this one's got you covered. I realize that an animated Disney princess movie might not be the first place you look, but this has some surprisingly good action sequences and fight choreography. If you liked Raya and the Last Dragon, I would recommend Disney's 1998 animated Mulan. Not only do we have the obvious dragon connection, but Mulan also featured a very action-intensive story with some surprisingly dark and heavy elements. And of course, there are some undeniable character similarities between Raya and Mulan, including things like their fighting skills, determination, and family-based motivations. If you want another more recent Disney film featuring a female character setting off on a journey to save her home, you should watch Moana. Again, there are some character similarities between Raya and Moana, and this time there are also some animation style similarities. Plus, both films feature a magical shape-shifting character who accompanies the lead on her quest. And if you liked some of the more adventurous exploration scenes and want something outside of the Disney realm, you might want to check out Tomb Raider. This is the reboot of the Lara Croft Tomb Raider film series and features some really good action sequences and another father-based motivation for the female protagonist. Alright, a couple questions for you guys. Number 1, have you seen Raya and the Last Dragon? If so, what'd you think of it? And number 2, what's the most recent Disney animated feature that you loved? Be sure to leave your answers in the comments below so we can get a discussion going. Alright, so if you got some enjoyment, insight, or information out of this review, I'd appreciate it if you'd hit that like button. And if you haven't done so already, please hit subscribe or add it to see more videos like this. Till next time, this has been Alyssa with Mainely Movies, the way life should be.